Dr. Joe Marshalla, you're a PhD in psychology.
No, philosophy.
In philosophy.
Yes.
And you've studied the Mayans and the Mayan culture for a number of years.
Yeah.
What's your latest work?
My latest work is a piece that we're calling, it started off being called The Sixfold Path, aligning with the 2012 transition. And that working title, we just finished shooting a documentary, and the working title right now is The Sixfold Path, A Life of Living Each Moment is New. And the work is based on the human need that we seem to have for creating traumatic events on the planet and in our lives, and what they serve and how they serve. And then the man-made structures, the superimposed structures, the memes, the dogmas, the unquestioned beliefs that tend to take us away from the truth of who and what we are, and take us away from the, if you will, the unification principle, the fact that we are one. You know, what are the things, what are the unquestioned beliefs that actually generate and sustain and feed the separation consciousness? And so the Sixfold Path is all about that, and it aligns truly with what the Mayans and many other cultures have been saying, even beyond the Mayans. And we seem to be in a major transition right now, and so I address what I believe through my observations that transition is.
So you have studied the Mayan calendars.
Yeah.
And the long count calendar, of course, is the one that's drawing all the media right now,
Right.
with its prophecies at the end on December the 21st at
right.
11 a.m. What are your feelings about that particular moment of transition? Do you actually believe there will be a noticeable transition of any type?
First of all, my opinion of the Mayan calendar is that it's not a marker in time at all. It is a marker in the evolution of consciousness. And that our superimposition of dates and times and all of that is just our way to try and organize, information. It has nothing to do with the truth and the reality, because if you look at the Mayan calendar and you see the shortening of cycles and the shortening of cycles, and you look at the paleontological record that we have, you can see that certain transitions occurred during various days, various nights, various days, various nights, and then you go up to the next level, and that same transition took place in the evolution of our consciousness, but in a shorter period of time, shorter period of time, to where it appears, if we were to superimpose time on it, that a generation now, which used to be 20 years, it takes only 20 days. And so that every day is like a year in the evolution of consciousness, and so this quickening that we're experiencing, has to do with a exponential, almost Fibonacci scale, if you will, scaling of the resonant frequency of all humans, And it seems to me, in my study of sociology, I dabble in all the sciences, and it seems to me that what I've watched in the history of the development of human consciousness is that there seems to be groupings of enemies, if you will, right? And it's, we're going against the Germans, or now we're going against the Iranians and the Iraqis, and we're going against, and then it's just like pulling the human resources to have this enemy, if you will. And that one of the beauties of what's happening, even with what I believe to be just kind of manufactured fears and everything around all of this that's happening with the Mayan calendar, is the unification of having a unified reality that is beyond human consciousness, that is a unifying principle to bring all people together, that we are subject to laws that are beyond what we create. Whether they're astrological in the sense of things happening with our sun and the higher coronal mass ejections that are occurring, and India, 300 million people without electricity because of an EMP pulse from a coronal mass injection just last week. These things are beyond our control, and then they talk about meeting the neighbors, quote unquote aliens, or whatever you want to call it. And so I believe that we're being kind of nurtured, if you will, into this unification principle. And the way we've done it is through fear. unfortunately. It doesn't have to be through fear. And it's through that fear, when everyone realizes, oh, we're still here, maybe we can, try a new way of being on the planet together. I don't see it the end of anything. I do feel a beginning. And yet, as far as time is concerned, the only thing that's real is right now. The past and the future are inevitable, but the only place our lives are occurring is right now. It's not like this thing is going to happen on that date. We've created that so that we have some marker, so we can measure something, so it has some meaning. But the transition is occurring right now on the planet, continuously.
So you're talking about the fear. You're talking about being unified because of an emotion, a heavy emotion such as fear.
Mm.
And you're also talking about man being warriors, as were the Mayans to a degree that's almost brutal. And they also had this belief in the underworld, which was based on a total fear, and it was so important to them. And they looked, my opinion, my studies show, they looked to the heavens because they didn't know much about the cosmos. They didn't have the understanding that we have today. Mm. And so they rather created their gods for a lack of scientific knowledge. Rather, they were searching for a spiritual answer to what they didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, how could they be so good and so right with their astronomical and mathematical calculation and yet be so wrong?
Well, I can't say right or wrong. I mean, it's all been part of the equilibration and evolution of our species as Homo sapiens, right? When we transferred from being Cro-Magnon man to Homo sapiens, we got a new brain part. Okay, Homo sapiens got a brain part, Cro-Magnon man didn't. Because Cro-Magnon man didn't, he was still part of the food chain, and because Homo sapien did, they were able to remove ourselves from the food chain and then ultimately put ourselves on top of the food chain, if you will. And it's called the prefrontal lobe. Okay, the prefrontal cortex, prefrontal lobe came right at that point, that juncture. Now, it was absolutely necessary because its job, okay, the prefrontal lobe's job was to be a life simulator. In other words, it can predict the future. It can take what's happening here and compare it to data that's now able, that's been stored, and then put two and two together and say, when saber-toothed tiger walks like this and comes this way, I'm going to be eaten. And so then when they would see that behavior, they would then be able to alter their behavior so as not to be eaten. Now, this was great. I mean, without this, we would not be here as we are. It was a wonderful brain part, and then it led us to being able to learn to live in caves, to stay warm, and build weapons, and agriculture, and everything to it. But what has happened is that the primordial survival adversaries, the primordial adversaries that we had no longer exist. We pushed them out of existence. But this brain part needs to justify its existence. It still needs to protect you from something. So because it didn't have real world adversaries, I submit it generated illusory adversaries, made them up. The devil, on and on, the Russians, the Jews, and on. Now, still, this prefrontal lobe is running amok, and what it's focused on, it's fear, because its job is to protect you, right? And so now it's trying to protect you from this 2012 collapse of time and the end of the world and all this other kind of stuff, and it's just all fantasized events appearing real. Fear, fantasized events appearing, it's just all totally manufactured, because the only thing that's real is right now. So, if there's anything that I see happening, you say, well, how could they be so right and so wrong? Is that everything is held in the universe, at least in the physical universe that we are aware of, in perfect balance. You have something, and then you have the perfect inverse mirror reversal of that. Everything is in balance. And so that great fear, that entire thing that is happening on a cellular level on so many beings, whether they want to think about it or not, it is in the vibration of the planet. There is an inverse mirror reversal of the beauty and the joy and the magnificence. And I believe that it's been absolutely critical for us to reach this critical, horrible, everything that's happening on the planet. Just reading in the paper today, millions of fish dying in Illinois because the water's too hot. And, the resources are deplenished. Everything all that stuff was created by this prefrontal lobe. All the heinous, awful things that we can't stand about this planet, all were in this defensive structure. We're going to get ours, take care of ours, do this, and the way, and the other businesses and the other people and all the countries and all this other kind of stuff, all the managing and the greed, all of that is the prefrontal lobe run amok. And what I'm witnessing as I travel and I lecture continuously and going to festivals and meeting hundreds of thousands of people, is that we're at a place where we're beginning to no longer identify with that piece of hardware that's in our biocomputer.
The frontal lobe.
The frontal lobe. And we're beginning to realize that it actually needs to become our servant as opposed to our master. And that we are learning to repurpose its function. And to identify the moment it's creating separation consciousness, to install new software. This is what I do. I mean, I travel the world and I teach how to do this, how to recognize when the prefrontal lobe is taking over and in control and putting you in a defensive stance and creating separateness and all this other kind of stuff. And being able to teach someone experientially how to separate from that and then come from the heart and see the unification. Because the unification is there. It always is. We're one. And the only thing that creates that separation is our mind. But all of this, all of the evolutionary process, all of the contrast that we've been seeing, all of it is absolutely necessary. Wow. Absolutely necessary.
We know that the Mayans had this seriously dark side about them.
Yeah. I know, I don't like thinking about it, because I want to put them on, nobody wants to, right? Everyone wants to put them up on this pedestal and say, oh, the Mayans, but it's like, hey, man, I mean,
I know, they're incredibly...
Whoever wins the game gets to get their head decapitated, woo, yay!
Did you know that they kept a Mayan king in one of the Mayan city-states? They kept him for 9 years alive so they could torture him every day. Yeah. I mean, that's insane.
Yeah.
Maybe you could comment on the potential of human achievement under our present thought systems as compared to those of the Mayans. In other words, you said that...
there's no question. Yeah.
We have advanced as a species. So we're so far beyond where they were.
No, I don't think so. I think we have measuring tools and equipment and technology that can verify our thoughts a little bit more. But what is really different is that we have become what is called an anthropocentric society, where man is, as opposed to ecocentric. Anthropocentric was that, we superimposed this thing called the Gregorian calendar that has no relationship at all to the cycles of really what's happening on the planet and what's happening in the cosmos and what have you, and it's really not Monday, and it's really not, it never was, never will be, and millions of people were murdered because they didn't want to believe it was Monday, and all of this kind of stuff. And what they had, what the Mayans had, was a relationship to the earth and the earth cycles, and each day, and your name, you came in with a meaning, and that was who you were, and the tone of the day, and how you align yourself with the frequency and the vibration and the rhythm of what was happening. This is called an ecocentric reality. There's no separation whatsoever. You are the environment, as opposed to you are separate from the environment, and the environment is there for your manipulation, gratification, and use. And that's where we went astray, if you will, this man over nature. And we separated ourselves. As I speak to the elders, and they say, back then they knew it was going to rain 3 or 4 days before it was going to rain because they could feel the barometric pressure. They could see what the trees were doing. They could sense it in their beings. They were one. There was no... They were one with the environment. And we are so far from that now. So with all of our advanced thinking and technology and all this other kind of stuff and our what we call quality of life, our quality of life is awful. The food we're producing, the water we're drinking, the pollution in the air, the EMF. Just the EMF right now, you and I are being bombarded with somewhere between 15 and 20,000 man-made square wave vibrations that are just pounding our neurology and our nervous system, and our cells are trying to communicate, and they're being disrupted. And we call that a better quality of life. It's not even close. It's not even close to a better quality of life. And what has happened over the generations is that we have bonded to what is unnatural as natural, as opposed to bonding to what's natural. And so then those who finally kind of break free of that meme, that bond to all of this unnatural stuff, and we break free and we're trying to save the trees, and we're just kooks, we're just whacks, because these other folks, unfortunately, other part of ourself has no relationship to the truth. I mean, when you bond to something, when a duck grows up with dogs, it thinks it's a dog. It has no idea it's a duck. None. No relationship to duckness at all. Grows up barking, chasing sticks, doing everything like a dog. And that's what we find ourselves in. We have bonded to what is completely unnatural as natural. That's the way it ends. No, it's not even close. And so what the Mayans had was that relationship. And everything that I have studied amongst the, all the calendars and how they interrelate and work and come together is in full relationship to the flow of life on the planet and how to be attuned with the flow of life and what your purpose within that flow is. That was magnificent. Absolutely magnificent.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, it's obvious they had no concept of a lineal time. They knew about cycles, but they couldn't even conceive of lineal time. It was much more like quantum physics.
Absolutely.
Let me ask you this question. There's some of the Mayanists have said that one of the prophecies is that Kukulkan will come out of the center of the Milky Way galaxy, where they have now found a black hole exists. The Mayans knew it.
Yeah.
Back in the 1500s, or back in the 800s, they knew there was a black hole there.
Yeah.
We didn't even know what a black hole was until recent history.
Right.
But they have, some of the studiers believe that perhaps that's one of their prophecies, that this new type of energy will come, and that end date of the long count calendar was the end of the old energy, and now a new energy. Of course, the transition was probably started 35 years ago, according to a lot of.
That's what I was going to say. This is, yeah.
So comment on that, if you would.
Once again, I had my eyes opened recently to actually being in relation to the stars as an individual, and going out and relating and getting to know them. Really feeling this, knowing where they are in their transitions and the movement of the planets, and not to give it meaning, but to just feel and to see what's going on and to relate and what have you. And as I've begun that practice, I have begun to sense different energetics that I can feel, almost like magnetic waves, if you will. From the Pleiades and from the Big Dipper and from the North Star and from all the different aspects and the Milky Way. And so their identification of a black hole, in my opinion, you have to realize how distracted we are with all of the things that are happening in our planet. Imagine if we had none of that, and you have generations of none of that, and you're just sitting there in the space, actually being able to feel the depth of everything. That they could sense this energetic. They could sense this energetic, and then they personified it, right? And yet they knew, because of how cycles were, and in relationship to those cycles, that for that to fully be enveloped in this reality here, it was going to take, quote-unquote, time, or at least the passing of the cycles, in order for that birthing, if you will, to take place. I have felt this energy myself. I have pursued releasing my identification and releasing my bonding to all of these things for 30-some years in order to be able to be sensitive enough. And it wasn't until 3.5 years ago, something you don't know about me, was that I had a very profound death experience where I was out of my body for 12 hours. And then came back and had real severe physical traumas and stuff like that, and had to rebuild from them. But the beauty of that experience is that it has brought a new sensitivity. As the systems turned on, as I got back in my body, a new level of awareness and understanding of how big, quote-unquote, I am, if you will. And like the me, the I, you, they, we, he, she, me, the big me, where there is no separation consciousness. And it's hard to put into words, and there's not a soul on the planet that I can talk to or meet, whether they're hip to metaphysics and the Mayans or not, that doesn't sense there's something going on. They can feel it. It's undeniable anymore. It's like when you turn a stereo on, and you slowly ramp up the volume on that stereo, that eventually, people really close to the stereo hear it, but then farther and farther away and farther and farther away and farther, and everyone's now beginning to hear the sound, if you will, and they feel it, and they're seeing that, the market's collapsing, and our identification with the materialism in our homes, and really, what is the purpose? Why am I on this rat race? I've spent 30, 40 years of my life working for this thing to build up this nest egg so I could last, and and now it's gone. And just the shaking up of everything that we made important is so unimportant, and everything that's important they made unimportant. And so this vision, this knowing of this energetic that would be coming through is now upon us and undeniable. And what happens, nobody knows, because it's all a great mystery. Every moment is fresh and new. Okay? That's the law of repeatlessness. Okay? The law of repeatlessness. No two moments, no two experiences, no two anything that are ever the same. Okay? So this moment never happened before, never happened again. Never happened before, never happened again. Never happened before, never happened again. And when you really get that, when you really grok that every moment is fresh and new, then you no longer try to recreate anything. An ecstatic state with God, a flavor, an orgasm, a joy, nothing. You simply drink in the nectar of what is. So you're not in the future chasing something, you're not in the past bemoaning something, you're simply being present. And that is waking up more and more and more and more across this planet as I visit and talk with people and know. And so, if every moment is fresh and new, that means every moment is unknown. And it's what the Native Americans called the Great Mystery. And that's the truth. So we can sit here and pretend and throw model after model and explanation after explanation, and the truth of the matter is we have no idea, but we sure sense like something's happening. And the best thing we can do is kind of let go of how we thought it was, or what we think it's going to be, and just receive and kind of transmute what is.
It's exactly what Robert Feynman said, the great theoretical physicist who's been dead 20 years. He said, you'll set out to find answers, but he said, maybe there is no answer that you're searching for. Maybe there is no answer.
Yeah, well, there's no end to it. I mean, the moment you get something, that may have been the way it is, but now, because of the law of repeatlessness, it's not that way anymore. Something new. There's nothing that we've ever learned that we didn't grow upon.
Wow. So, you have been invited to speak at the production at Chichen Itza on the 21st.
Yes.
What do you intend to talk about?
Well, I begin several things. One, teaching real-world, moment-to-moment tools and techniques for staying present and staying in the space that I'm talking about. That's present and evolving. Because I think of us, everything is a vibration. If we break it down to quantum physics, everything is a measurable frequency. Your body, this chair, and we can measure its frequency. So, there's some frequencies that seem to be detrimental to our beings. Let's say carbon dioxide. Okay, that's a frequency. That's all it is. It's a measurable frequency. It's this frequency, and when it gets into these biosuits here, it seems to have a negative effect on them, on these what I call ambulatory water balloons. Okay? But the plants, the trees, the grasses, the seaweeds, the plankton, these things, they all transmute. They take that energetic, that vibration that's harmful to us, and they transmute it into another one that's beneficial for all life. The oxygen. I believe our function is identical. That we take the fears, the angers, the separations, the non-acknowledged self, the whatever you want to call it, any pain, any confusion, anything that's going on, and we can transmute it into love. Anything. In real time. And so, not in a theoretical way, we actually do a skill transference right there where I show very simply techniques that anyone can do at any time. No excuses. That you can just turn on the part of your brain that takes you there, to that place. It's there. Just the wiring has been turned off. And so I'll be talking about that. I'll be talking about the memes, the unquestioned beliefs that keep us from that place and keep us from really knowing our true authentic self, because these superimposed structures actually separate us from the ecocentric reality and separate us from the rhythms of life and separate us from even being able to know the difference between us and the vibrations that I'm talking about. Until you can find that true authentic self, by breaking free of those authentic, those memes that we've superimposed on this, these structures that we've superimposed. They're man-made. They don't have any relationship to anything real, but we live our lives by them. We haven't questioned them for hundreds and hundreds of years. And so I will be discussing those so that we can literally open ourselves and be part of the transmutation of everything that is unreal, that we have bonded to and made real and perpetuate, which is causing the problems and suffering that we have on the planet today.
How do you think they were able to calculate mathematically or astronomically? Do you think that they were given that knowledge from another source, or do you think they were able to actually figure it out without telescopes and without... I mean, when our European heritage, the heritage of most of us here in America, we were in the Dark Ages, and it wasn't until 1600 Copernicus, who even he had to recant the heliocentric theory instead of the geocentric. But they knew that back in probably 200. They knew that we revolved around the sun.
Yeah.
And yet, how could they have gotten that knowledge? Some people suggest that it was through psychedelic drugs, by taking. They were known to imbibe a lot.
Yeah.
And even alcohol. They would do enemas with alcohol.
Yeah. I presume you mean psychedelic.
Psychedelic.
Psychotropic is pharmacological.
Okay, psychedelic. Yeah. Do you think they expanded their consciousness in some way to gain this knowledge, or did they actually calculate it mathematically?
Yeah, it's brilliant. I could make up a whole bunch of stories, and I think a whole bunch of other people could make up a whole bunch of stories. Right, and very intricate stories, whether it was given to them by aliens and given to,
that's another theory.
And then psychedelics I've heard. And the best I can figure... Okay. There's one entity here that is evolving. And that one entity includes our stars, includes the aliens, includes our life forms, includes all the cells and structures all the way down to the mitochondria. I mean, all the way down as far as you can go on the micro level. There's one experience happening here and learning about itself. And it's like, how could the right hand know what the left hand feels like without the left hand? It couldn't. And so contrast has been required within this singularity in order to understand itself. Now that includes everything that we could possibly imagine in the known universe is all part of a singularity. Now that singularity has knowledge. That singularity is knowledge. And so very possibly that singularity expressed its knowledge and its understanding through this culture. Just coming through like an antenna. They were just vehicles through which it was mapped and put into a three-dimensional form that could then begin to structure our brains and learn and work, if you will. But anything other than that, I would just be making up, and even that, kind of making up. You know what I mean? I mean, it's just...
Well, it's an educated theory, educated guess.
And the only thing is I can think for myself is it really doesn't matter. It makes no difference. Just seeking the meaning of life. Okay? Because the meaning's changing continuously. If every moment is unknown, if there is any meaning, it's that there's no meaning, and it's completely, constantly, we are the meaning. Right now, you and I, we are the meaning. The people who are watching, and they're the meaning. And we can't put our finger on it, like we were saying, knowledge, you grab it and make it the static thing, and whatever we say is the meaning of life, maybe that's what it was into that moment, but it's constantly evolving and changing and growing and what have you. And so for me, quite frankly, it's irrelevant where they got it. All I know is that when I listen, and I understand, and I feel, and I apply the vibrations and the cycles that they talk about and the structures, that there's a sense of home there for me, a sense of, yeah. And that's all I can really relate to, is that there's a truth resonance to it. And so I respected with great reverence that feeling. And all the interpretations and stories, could care less.
Okay, okay.
Quite frankly.
Beautiful way to feel. Now, in the Dresden Codex, they did make prophecies. They did, at least that's the deciphering of it, that they made these prophecies that there would be a time of bread, and then it would be followed by a time of water, which has been interpreted as for 10 years from the 21st on, it will still be time for us to eat well and to have a lot of, get ready. Then a flood could come and drastic change could take place. Now this was supposedly one of the prophecies in that Dresden Codex.
Yeah.
So
the only thing I can think, okay, in that is that at that time, they could not foresee, if you will, where we are today and how many people were inhabiting the planet and the technology that we had and all that other kind of stuff. Okay? And so the metaphor that they would use to explain the transition.
How accurate could it be? In other words, how much credence could you put on a prophecy by them?
Well, the best way, yeah. Well, if we go back, the work of Kalaman and Ian Lungold, and you put their two pieces together, it makes a really clear picture of, literally, we can look at the paleontological record. We literally can look at what happened to the dinosaurs and then what happened to Cro-Magnon man and the evolution of consciousness in the cell and individual consciousness and group consciousness and then laws and then morals and all these different types of things, even down to when Watergate happened. Literally, it was in the 5th day at a certain year, and it just happens to line up when the dinosaurs, you know what I mean? There's like this whole thing. And it's very compelling because the alignments that you see with each one of the evolutions of our consciousness and then how they played out in the next millennium of our existence and what have you, that I think that they're just simply identifying those structures. It's kind of like you can say in the fall the leaves come off the trees and then they sit there naked, and then in the spring at some point it knows when, and they bud and they come, and then it gets warmer, and you could just see those cycles. Well, in the same way, they go through evolutionary cycles of human consciousness and life on the planet. And so they were observing for so long and seeing that and matching it to these different calendars that they brought together, that I see no problem with the metaphor being extended, or the cycles being extended. But they knew that they were getting faster and faster and faster, that it would happen faster and faster. It's kind of like the difference between someone who's really not healthy and they get a cut on their leg. It takes them a long time to heal. Right? And someone who's really healthy, it heals very quickly. Okay? And so as we've gotten healthier and healthier, if you will, closer and closer to the oneness, it happens that much faster. And so making it 10 days or this day, 10 weeks or 10 years or what have you, I have no problem with. Now the metaphor of water and the food and all of that, I see it more as kind of like food for the soul. Not necessarily on the physical terms that we're going to be without this and the floods are going to come. Maybe they will. I don't know. I can just make it. But I really just see it as a dark night of the soul and the light night of the soul, and in this rebirthing that's taking place. We're like in this blender, and we're all being put into, we're going to become something, homogenize something, whatever it is. People talk about us, we're transitioning from being, now we went from Cro-Magnon to Homo sapien, and now we're transitioning from Homo sapien to Homo luminous. And that the light essence of who we are is finally coming out. And that our requirement for food, our requirement for water, our requirements for those things will be tremendously less. Because that which gives us life will be able to pour through us that much more. It's just as simple as a brand new baby. A brand new baby does not live on breast milk alone. There's not enough nutrients, there's not enough substance, there's not enough. There's something else that's happening there between that mother and that baby that causes it to grow. And so in that same way, the nurturing of each other, the caring of each other, the nursing of each other is the new energetic, the new food, the new essence that we will be feeding off of each other, if you will.
Last question. Blowing my mind. Human consciousness. Is it possible for a collective human consciousness to be expanded because of an energy, a new type of energy, for example?
Absolutely.
Simple answer. Thank you, folks. We got it. I love you, man.